Well, hello there, Dippers, and welcome back to episode 64 of the Knuckle Sammich podcast, the official MMA podcast of Sauce on the Side. As always, Dippers, I'm your host, Drake, joined by the coldest man in town, the one, the only, Mr. Thomas Czar Shackelford.
Hopefully we break the curse.
We have to break the curse. And joining us today is our producer, Mr. Leighton Pip Shaventone.
Well, once upon a time, I was beating you in picks. This is like 30 weeks ago, probably. But I can do that again. We need to start.
You know what? I think because there's a fighter on here that I know you know, so this might be your day to pick.
What's the fight called? I pulled up here and I was going to say, pick who I think's going to win.
It is...
Just look up...
UFC on ESPN 4.
Yeah, or just go next UFC event. That's always the easiest way to do it for a guy like me. So, Dippers... We're sorry. Mr. Shackelford has been ice cold. There has been some wild fights. Last weekend's card, though it was free, was absolutely insanity. As far as just fun to watch, last week's card is right up there with basically any card we've had this year. Mr. Shackelford will look to get back to his winning ways. We talked about it. We hyped it up, how he was on fire just 2 weeks ago. But today is the day where the straw breaks the camel's back, and we will get back to giving you perfect picks for this week. So, Mr. Pitt, before we do any of that, you know what to do.
Welcome to the Knuckle Sammich podcast with Thomas R. Shackelford, a Sauce on the Side production.
All right, Mr. Shackelford. So, best fight of the night, your favorite fight on the card, Darren Elkins, Ryan Hall. Is that a must-watch fight for everybody at home who might not have watched it?
Absolutely. It's one of the craziest fights I've ever seen.
We say that every time Darren Elkins
suggest... Fights. Well, it was really Ryan Hall that made it crazy. Darren Elkins just stood there and took some ninja kicks to the head. I mean... He survived. He took a lot of damage. His nickname held up. You really need to watch the Jackie Chan movie. I think it's Legend of the Drunken Master. You need to watch that first, then watch this fight, and it'll all become clear.
It'll all come full circle. So, Mr. Shackelford, we will talk about the main card here and talk about some of the picks. So, first up, I think you only won one fight on the main card. Which is absolutely crazy.
You won one fight?
Yes.
Hold on. It wasn't even like I picked all dogs. I think this one I almost picked all favorites.
This was one of the ones that he went heavy on the favorites, and the favorites just did not show up. In fact, I was actually running it back. 3 of your last, 5 losses have been within the first minute of the fight.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty, with the Marvin Vettori and Cesar Ferreira. Within 2 minutes, I knew Ferreira was losing that fight.
Absolutely.
I watched it. I watched 3 full of his fights that morning before I put out my things. He grapples in most of his fights. And then all of a sudden in this one, he's getting out wrestled by a guy from Italy who don't know shit about wrestling.
Yes, terrible. But as far as Marvin Vettori goes, I've been on the Marvin Vettori train for quite some time. I've really liked him. I think this guy is the real deal.
He did look good. He did. His striking looked a lot better, which he works with Rafael Cordero at the former shoot-to box guy. He looked a lot better. I only have known him from one fight, and that was the Israel Adesanya fight, which they said on the broadcast, wow, this guy went to a split decision with Israel Adesanya. That fight was a clear... it could have been 30-27. That's how clear of a win it was for Adesanya. But I don't know what one judge was thinking, but he did give it to Vettori. So they're kind of splitting hairs there. They're yes, the record books show that he got a split decision against the interim champ. But if you watch the fight, it was crazy. He looked really good. Did you hear who he called out?
No, because it kept bleeping everything out.
I did notice that, which is crazy because it was on ESPN Plus. I didn't
realize ESPN Plus went soft on us.
Yeah, I don't know. He called out Paulo Costa.
Oh, I did hear that because it bleeped what he had said out, so it didn't really stick with me. But then the announcer said that he called out Paulo. I like that.
If there's two guys on this planet I'm not calling out, it's Paulo Costa or
Yoel
Romero, and they're getting ready to fight. They're fighting each other here in a couple weeks, so
I wouldn't be mad if Vettori got Paulo Costa.
I wouldn't. I mean, I would absolutely watch it. It'll be two dudes drubbing each other till someone falls. I think Vettori would be the one to fall, but he looked pretty good the other night.
Yes, he did. So you talked about the bad decision with the Israel Adesanya fight. This is another fight that I think was a very bad decision. You had actually picked Wellington Turman, who was an underdog in this fight. Ends up losing a 3-round decision to Carl Roberson. I don't know how he lost the fight. It was a split decision. 2 of the judges gave Carl Roberson the first and the second. All 3 judges gave Turman the third. I thought Turman obviously won the second round. Am I just wrong?
No, I mean he had the back for a long time. I think he even mounted a long time. He did. Roberson's explosive, so I really think where Turman messed up is he did go to like mount, or he was trying to do a real loose, like hit the choke before he got hooks in on the back and would get flipped. But most of the time, he was in the dominant position. I was surprised by that decision. And that was, Vettori came out and you could tell within a minute he was going to win. Then the next fight, you feel like the dude got robbed a little bit. I was like, this night's done with.
Yeah, this night was toast after that. Because in that fight, I thought it was just so bizarre that they still gave the decision to Roberson. And if you look at time controlled, I mean, Turman absolutely dominated that. In fact, I think Turman's going to be the guy that on the next card that he fights, he's going to be one of the guys at the bottom bill that you're just circling saying, hey, watch out for this guy. He's a very, very good fighter, and he's only 22.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't he really, really young?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a real young kid. Everything looks good about him. I mean, and Roberson's had several fights in the UFC, and this was this kid's opening fight. Definitely a dude to look for in the future. I mean, there is some positions he could have just went heavy on and just, maybe if he had a little more octagon minutes under his belt, he would have known, like, hey, I really just have to,
stay here.
Sack of potatoes here on top of him and I'll be okay. But being a young kid, he got that hard on for the finish. He was going hard, may have spent his juice a little. Got in trouble.
Yeah, such a bummer in that fight there. I thought that was a very poor decision. Next up was the only fight that you had won on this card. It was Josh Emmett versus Mirsad Bektic. Emmett was actually a dog that you had picked. He did win. Ends up finishing Bektic in the first round. Josh Emmett looked great. Good win for him, kind of in his hometown, home area. What'd you see in that fight that you're going to take away from the future from both of these guys?
Mirsad's kind of an enigma. He's been in the UFC for a long time. I think they said a stat. He has had 7 canceled fights. That's crazy. When I was looking at him, he only fights like once a year, once every 2 years. He's had 7 canceled fights, some due to his injury, some due to his opponent's injury. He just seems like a guy that's had a lot of bad luck. And he's a guy that was super touted and just good all around, a very good fighter. He just can't seem to catch a break. Emmett, man, Emmett, it's almost, he was a 55-pounder that was so-so. I think he lost one at 55. He was just getting out-muscled, which is crazy. I finally found the picture and shared it on Twitter of his before when he weighs 184 pounds. So he's dropping from 184 to 145, and at 55 he looked like a shrimp. So that kind of goes to show you how big the 55-pounder guys are in real life. But Emmett, so he came down, dusted 2 tough dudes, Lamas and I forget who else. Then he got up against Jeremy Stephens, and Jeremy Stephens trashed him. Like, he was having numbness in his hands, he was memory loss, like a lot of crazy things. I wasn't sure he was going to come back. Then he comes back, knocks out Michael Johnson after losing basically 14 minutes and 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden this fight he comes out, he's got a really high guard, he's moving his head a lot better, not getting hit as much, and he basically knocked out Bektic with a freaking jab. He jabbed him and knocked him out.
He looked great. He definitely looked great. Hopefully he's there to stay.
He'll be a tough fight there at 45. He's a very tough fight for anybody, and he's a really good wrestler. I forget his background. He wrestled. Shoot, I can't remember if it was somewhere up in Oregon or California, but he was good, like All-American, I believe.
Yeah.
That's a tough fight for like Max Holloway, a big puncher that's a good wrestler. That's a tough fight for Holloway.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. So next up, probably the biggest outlier on this card, Uriah Faber comes off of basically a 2-year hiatus, comes out of retirement to fight in his hometown, takes a fight against Ricky Simon, who was one of the biggest favorites on the card. Faber ends up finding a way to get it done in his hometown of Sacramento, finishes Simon in the first round, basically one club to the head, and Simon was down. Such a weird fight. I felt like whenever Faber came out in the fight, I did not think that he looked good at all. Ends up hitting that big overhand right, which is the first knockdown I think that they said he's had since or the first knockout he's had in 12 years.
It's been a long time.
How did this happen? Did you think Faber looked good up until that point?
He's 40 and he looks like he's 20.
He looked good
physically.
But I thought he just looked lost.
The Ricky Simon or Simone or whatever they were calling him, I'm calling him Simon. I'm not going to fancy it up. That's like Dierte. We're not fancying it up. It's Simon. He seemed choppy. Like, he kind of seemed choppy. Simon, I felt like Simon maybe rung his bell once, hit him one good time. I think Faber, that 2 years off was good to him. Like, he's talked about it, like, I guess he grew up like super hippie. His parents were wheatgrass shots, vinegar, just as hippie as you can get. They were that.
Checks out.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
So he's lived a super healthy life. Like I said, he looks better at 40 than I did when I was 8, when I was like in peak physical abdomen prime. I think it was good for him, his body and everything, and him being in Sacramento, just that walk. What'd you think of that walkout? The California kid,
awesome.
The headband, he's got his long hair again, he comes out, California, the song, everything, amazing. It's almost one like, in your head, you're just like, he wasn't going to lose that. Why did we pick against him?
It was so weird, dude. And whenever he knocked him down, that was the loudest I've ever heard the stadium get that you could hear on the television.
I think that kid didn't respect him. I mean, that kid just was wading in with his hands down, and like you said, he hasn't had a knockdown. He hits crazy hard. I think he knocked down Dominic Cruz twice in one of their fights, either the first or second. But
this is his first TKO since 07.
Yeah, it's his first TKO. I don't remember him ever. He usually, if he knocks somebody down, he usually wraps the guillotine up on him. I don't know that I've ever seen him TKO anybody, even back in his WEC days. It's just insane. I love it. I love it for him. And then he comes out and he has the hilarious speech making fun of Dana White, calls out the Triple C Cejudo, who had 2 weeks ago we're like, what the hell is he calling Faber out for? He's 40, he's been retired, and now you're like, oh, wait a second, I'll watch that fight all day long.
Oh yeah, dude, it almost worked out perfect because I don't even know if Faber had even had the fight scheduled whenever Cejudo knocked him out.
I'm sure he had it scheduled, but I don't think people knew Faber had a fight scheduled. Even when it happened, I forgot Faber had a fight coming up. I was just like, the dude's retired. What are you talking about?
One thing, though, that I could see that kind of played into this, Ricky Simon actually got married last week.
I did.
So he was like doing the whole wedding prep around his fight camp.
Yeah, he was supposed to be on his They said he was supposed to be on his honeymoon fight night, and I guess what'd you say? 2 weeks before. So he got married 2 weeks ago. He had to like leave the wedding or whatever
and basically go straight to Sacramento.
Yeah. So he said it was super weird, but it would be worth it. And like now you look at it and you're like, probably should have went on that honeymoon.
Yeah, you should have just got married, walked off in the sunset.
I think he was leaving like after the fight. I imagine a honeymoon is much better out of a win than a loss. Can you imagine sitting around for a week with your wife who's just she's your wife. She's wanting to hang out on the beach, do romantic shit, and you're just bawling in the cold shower running over you.
It would definitely be rough because a terrible night like that could honestly even overshadow what Ricky Simon could consider the best night of his life.
Yes. It went from a dream scenario of fighting like the greatest name in little guy fighter history, you getting an easy win, riding off into the Mexican sunset on your honeymoon, to getting clobbered, going to the hospital, having to go on an airplane to your Mexican vacation, and then just being miserable for a week.
It'd be rough.
If this marriage lasts, it'll be a miracle.
Yes, it will be.
I mean, it's not going to get any worse than this week.
No, it cannot go any worse than this.
Poor bastard.
Especially to start.
That goes to show you right there. Never get in a fist fight.
I don't think he
on
watched
your
Rocky.
honeymoon week. No, he messed up. He messed up big time.
Women make the knees weak.
They make the knees weak.
That's true. Last up, we have Aspen Ladd getting knocked out by Jermaine Durandamy in the first 16 seconds of the fight. We saw the horrific, and I'm going to double underline, horrific weigh-in from Aspen Ladd. This isn't the first time that she's looked this bad at weigh-ins, but it's the first time that she looked it bad in the fight after the weigh-in. This was like an all-timer. People that weren't even involved in MMA were reaching out saying how this woman should not fight. The weigh-in, if you didn't see it, it's going to explain a lot to what happened in the fight. Mr. Shackelford, do you think that the weight cut had a lot to play into this? I think it's a no-brainer.
I do think it's a no-brainer. I mean, she looks so bad on that scale. I mean, she could barely stand up. It was pain. She had pain in her face just making it to the scale. They did say the California Commission came out and was like, it wasn't as bad as it looked. She's feeling better after hydrating. They said something that I hadn't heard before. They said her nares, she had some fluid in her nares, like her, I guess they checked her nose and it wasn't completely bone dry, which to me, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I've never seen a ER physician or anybody be like, let me check their nares to see if it's, if the mucous membrane is moist. That's what they said. We checked her nares and their mucous membrane was moist. Like, come on, man. I could take some Mucinex and my mucous membrane would be dry as a bone. Like,
yeah.
She looked bad. And I mean, it was a technical strike that she got hit with. We knew Durandamy was a much better striker than her. But, I mean, she just got clobbered. And I've heard a lot of people say online that it was an early stoppage. But, I mean, she went down and she was on all fours, facing away from Durandamy and just not moving at all. So
I think that had Herb Dean never saw the weigh-in, though, that fight would not have been stopped that fast.
He may have let it go a little farther, but I'm glad he didn't.
I'm glad he didn't.
I will always say stop him early. It's like the Cejudo and Dillashaw thing. I'd rather see it stopped early because we knew which way it was going.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're just prone or whatever on all fours facing away from the opponent and not making any... Really, the only reason she even made any movement is because Durandamy then got on top of her, swung a couple fists, and when she kind of got up, it kind of rotated her body to her. It wasn't like she made this great big movement to get Durandamy. It was more like Durandamy moved her towards her. So
yeah, no, I agree. I feel like a lot of people aren't satisfied unless somebody's completely just lifeless on the cage.
Like Ben Askren. They want to see Ben Askren.
Yes, that, or they want to see the person just like awake enough to try to fight the ref.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm perfectly fine with the stoppage.
I 100% am too, especially knowing what I knew going into fight night there. So next up, we actually have the ESPN card that is headlined by Leon Edwards and Rafael Dos Anjos. This is a heavyweight dream, man. Like, this card, top to bottom, a lot of really good heavyweights in this card, which is kind of rare for them to throw out 3 actually pretty solid heavyweight fights. And we're going to rattle off the big boys first. Starting off with Ben Rothwell taking on Andrei Arlovsky. Rothwell is the -190 favorite to Andrei Arlovsky's 155 underdog. So, Mr. Shackelford, let's get back in the right direction. Got to get back in the win column. Where are we going?
We are going to go Rothwell. Rothwell had a tough fight. His last one with the Blagoy. And now we know that's a tough fight to come off a 2-year suspension and take. So I'm going to go Rothwell. I think he mushes Arlovsky against the fence and does enough work to get the victory here.
Okay, so next up on the heavyweight card, we have Walt Harris taking on Leighton C's man, Alexei Oleinik, the man who has made the God choke a staple of his game. Walt Harris is a minus 155 favorite to Alexei Oleinik's plus 125 dog. Mr. Shackelford, keep us winning.
This is a tough one for me. I want to pick Oleinik. I really do. You remember he got battered his last fight on really short notice against Alistair, which I guess they're friends. They trained a lot before, so it was more like a weird friendly sparring session. But this is tough. I'm going to go Walt Harris. I think that he's a young gun. He's on a bit of a roll. I think he's got a little more to offer at this stage of the game than Oleinik. Now, I like Oleinik better. If it's me just picking as a fan, I'm gonna pick Oleinik in this. But since we're trying to get back on the hot streak, I'm not gonna go the dog on this one. I'm gonna go play it safe. Say Walt Harris gets the W.
That actually surprises me, that pick. I thought you were going to go Alexei Oleinik.
I know. Don't talk me out of it.
How young is old Walt Harris? I mean, he only had 19 fights, 20 fights.
How many? Hey, read off how many Oleinik's got real quick.
70.
70.
A whole lot of God took practice.
Yeah, and if you look at it, most of them, Harris is 12-1. He beat up Daniel Spitz.
He's 12-7.
I believe he beat. There's a no contest against Arlovsky. I want to say he beat Arlovsky, and then I don't remember. Something weird happened in that fight. I can't remember.
One of them got popped for testing hot or something.
Maybe it was Harris. Harris must have got popped. But then he had a big win over Sergey Spivak. I'm going to go Harris. I'm going to hold down on that. The fandom in me, just me liking Oleinik, wants to pick him. I will say that. But the guy that's trying to help you guys out with bets, help you to make money, I just play it safe. We got other areas we can go the dog in.
Okay. So next up, this is kind of surprising, the odds on this fight, because typically whenever we see Greg Hardy fight, they just basically throw him out there against a kind of a schlub. They have been Greg Hardy, Juan Adams. The odds are dead even, minus 115 both ways. I know, Mr. Shackelford, we've been rooting for this for a long time. Is this the fight we get to see Greg Hardy get obliterated?
This is a tough one. So Juan Adams is a tough dude. He is, they say 6'5". I think he's a little bigger than that. I follow him on Twitter. I think like 2 weeks ago he was like 295 pounds.
Holy smokes.
He's a very, very, very big guy. Not a fat guy either, just a gigantic guy. I think size-wise, he will be the first guy that Hardy's fought that's bigger than him, for one. The other thing, this dude's durable. He's got a good chin. And the thing that worries me about him is I don't want to say he's a slow starter. He's kind of slow-ish, whereas he's not a two-stroke. He's a four-stroke. He's cruising at 35, 40, and you're having a great time, whereas Greg Hardy's a two-stroke. He's going 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, breaking your neck. What worries me is he jumps out and jumps on Juan, maybe clips him, and we have a
Hopefully
a ref
it won't be
stop
like Greg Hardy's last fight.
No.
It's almost impossible.
The good thing about Juan Adams is because he just goes that cruising pace, he can cruise that pace the entire fight. He did lose his last one. I watched that one because he was a touted prospect, and the reason I started watching him is because he was making fun of Greg Hardy so much on Twitter. I was like, well, I got to see what this dude's about. So I watched his fight. he should have won that fight. He fought a dude, I think, out of AKA. The guy just basically wrestled him the whole time, and really, he didn't wrestle him that well. I think Juan Adams thought he was winning and let himself get stuck on the fence for kind of long periods in some spots, and he didn't land any of his big punches. So he does have that last loss. I don't really think he lost it, but it is what it is. I think what we have going on here is Juan Adams is going to put it in cruise control and wear Greg Hardy down.
Because the last time we saw him have to go into a little bit of deep waters, he got the out that he was looking for with that illegal strike.
And I don't know that you know that, but the guy that Alan Crowder just fought, and he got knocked out in like 20 seconds. So that dude's not as tough as we thought it, because that's what we're like, oh man, that dude's got a good chin. He stood up to Greg Hardy. Well, he got knocked out by Jairzinho Rosenstruck in 9 seconds.
What?
Yes, this was what fight card was this on?
No, we didn't think he was that impressive.
That was against Moicano and the Korean Zombie. So the guy that took Greg Hardy to the limits and basically made him throw an illegal strike to get out of there just got KO'd in 9 seconds by some guy we've never heard of.
Okay.
So I'm saying Juan Adams going in cruise control. He's gonna low rider it to a 3rd round stoppage of Greg Hardy, and hopefully the Hardy experiment is over.
I agree. I love that pick. I'm gonna have to ride that, man. I like the little 4-stroke comparison though. That's good.
I mean, that's what it is. We got 2-stroke versus a 4. You know me. I'll go 4-stroke all day long.
Oh yeah.
I'm not interested in those 2 strokes.
No,
She said.
I can't disagree with you. So next up, we actually have a very interesting fight. I think this one's one of the toughest ones to pick on the card. We have Dan Hooker, who is a minus 135 favorite, to James Vick, plus 105 dog. The odds say a lot. Obviously, close in Vegas's eyes. I think it's close in our eyes as well. What do you like in this card?
You know, I'm going to go Hooker, and that's just off pure toughness. I think that there's a game plan now on how you can beat James Vick, and that's you crowd him, you get in his face, and you throw some big punches, big overhand rights. I think Hooker, who trains with Israel Adesanya out of that camp, his kickboxing is really next level. I think he's going to hit Vick with a lot of leg kicks and make Vick move in quick and end up eating a right and possibly a stoppage here.
Okay, I like that pick, man. I hate picking against the executioner.
I do. I really like Vick, and Vick's got a great chance of winning. But I think Hooker will be able to take. Vick's got to get back to that fighting long. He can't let these guys crowd him. And now he's had 2 fights.
He's like 10 foot tall. And,
and he's always done a really good job at keeping people off of him. But the last 2, Gaethje really exposed him. Gaethje's like, hey, you put your head in the dude's chest and throw a right hand, and he can't do anything about it. I think Hooker's the perfect. Really, Gaethje and Hooker, they have about the same exact fighting style.
Yeah.
So I see it going about like that.
Okay, so next on the card, we have Alexander Hernandez, who is a minus 185 favorite over Francisco Trinidaldo, who is a plus 150 dog. Mr. Shackelford, not 2 household names here, but what is your pick on this fight?
Well, Hernandez, you remember, he's the one that talked all that smack against Cowboy, and then Cowboy beat him down.
Yeah.
This, I think, is his first fight since then. I think he probably learned a lot, because I haven't heard one single word from him this fight. Trinaldo's a tough dude. He's fought a lot of the. I mean, he TKO'd Paul Felder. He beat Yancey. He's beat Pearson. He beat Norman Park. He's beat a lot of tough guys. But I'm going to go Hernandez on this. I think he is a young kid that's really, really good, and I think Cowboy taught him a few lessons, and I think he's going to come back from that.
Yeah, I like that pick as well, because, I mean, going into that Cowboy fight, it was a huge hype train surrounding Hernandez.
Oh, yeah.
and talking about how good he was, and then Cowboy basically just came out and looked just about as good as he ever had.
Yeah,
so
throttled him.
It'll be a very interesting fight here. So last up, the headliner here, we have Leon Edwards opening as a minus 130 favorite to Rafael Dos Anjos, who has even odds. I think this is a very interesting matchup. I think this will be I think it'll be an interesting fight. I'm not going to say it's the most fun fight on the card, but I think this will be an interesting one, maybe a chess match. What do you like in this fight?
God, this is so tough.
Very tough.
Leon Edwards, he's only had, his only loss is to Usman, and it was a decision. Look at the guys he's fought. He beat Luque. He's beat Barberena. That Peter Sabata dude's tough. And then he beat Cowboy and Gunner. The dude's on a roll. I mean, he's won 7 straight, and the only one he's lost is against Usman. The big thing is he's 6 foot tall. RDA is 5'9", so he's got 3 inches on him. He's a southpaw. Gosh, but then again, you hate to pick against RDA. You look at the guy who's RDA lost to, just Usman and Covington.
Yeah.
So, and those are 2 predominantly wrestlers, which Leon Edwards
beat Kevin
is.
Lee, beat Robbie Lawler, beat Neil Magny. And he's kind of just fought murderers row, because you even go past that. Beat Donald Cerrone, beat Anthony Pettis, beat Nate Diaz, lost to Tony Ferguson, lost to Eddie Alvarez. There's not an easy fight in his last 10.
What's the odds on this one?
RDA is the slight dog, even odds. You bet 100, you win 100. Leon Edwards, you bet 130 and you win 100.
I hate to do this, but I think my gut says to pick Leon Edwards, and I think a lot of people are going to bet heavy on RDA as the fight rolls in, because that's the name people know.
Yeah.
So I think as the fight rolls in, more money's going to go Dos Anjos' way, which will make the Edwards pick a little bit more fruitful. So I am going to go Edwards. I think that size, I don't know. I just think that size and his good striking and his clinch work is really, really good. I think he's going to be able to keep Dos Anjos at bay.
It's going to be a fun fight.
Again, this one's like the Olynyk one. I love RDA.
So do I.
Just as a fan, I'd pick RDA a million times. But stylistically and just how Leon Edwards is fighting, and he's right there at the top, man. Masvidal just had that big win. They had a scuffle in London. He just... a shade just barely lost that fight to Ben Askren, and now you're talking about Masvidal for the title. So Edwards is right up there. So it's going to be a tough fight. I'm going to go Edwards by decision.
Okay, that is actually one that surprised me. I figured you'd go Olynyk and RDA in those picks. So, Mr. Shackelford, any news and notes around the MMA world or the UFC that we have to discuss?
There's been a ton. I do want to say one fight on this card that's going to be probably fight of the night is Caceres versus Steve Peterson. Peterson's nickname is Ocho. He is the guy with the gigantic Superman tattoo on his chest with some sort of Bam Bam Bigelow style flames coming out of it. I'm going to call that fight of the night before the night. There's so much going on. Sandahagen just got paired up with I can't remember his that Sandahagen kid that we like a lot just got a big fight coming up. I'm trying to think. Really, the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is Dana said Masvidal. A lot of people, Masvidal kind of called out McGregor, and it's getting a little steam behind it. Dana just straight up said, "Hey, that fight's not happening," and the Conor will not get Khabib or Poirier, the winner of that. And then he also said the Triple C is going to get Joey B.
Wow. So Uriah's out of the question for now.
Yeah, for now. If they put him up against another young kid and he gets another win, they're gonna Aljamain's out of the picture for sure.
Okay. Any other news and notes? Alex Caraceres, Ray Borg. Like, there's some decent names on this card that we didn't even really talk about. I'm really looking forward to this card. I think it'll actually be kind of a diamond in the rough, especially for free fights.
It'll be good. It'll be very good.
Okay. And on that note, for Drake, for Leighton C, and Mr. Shackle, for Dippers, as always, stay saucy.